Hello, everyone. Today, I'm bringing you a story about a beautiful assistant and her romance with a talented female director. Listen until the end to find out about the relationship between these two characters and how they make love to each other. Before we dive into the story, please give a like and subscribe. Without making you wait any longer, let's get into the story. I'm Emily, a new administrative assistant at the company. When I was hired as the personal assistant to Jess, a young, determined CEO, I knew the job would be demanding. But what I hadn't anticipated was Jess's intense allure. Jess is a confident, strong, and captivating woman. She's tall, with a well-defined, graceful figure and soft curves. Every time she walked into the room, people's eyes seemed to naturally gravitate toward her, not just because of her position, but also because of her calm, authoritative demeanor. Though she often kept a serious and composed expression, there was a natural charm about her that was hard to look away from. Jess's gaze was sharp, yet sometimes a strange gentleness would surface, pulling me in whenever our eyes met. Her choice of professional attire was always elegant, modest, and just enough to emphasize her figure, highlighting her sophisticated yet feminine presence. I knew, right from the start, that I was drawn to Jess not only because she was my boss, but because of her unique style and the way she carried herself. As her personal assistant, I had frequent opportunities to work closely with Jess. She was strict and meticulous about work, but over time, I came to see that she was also considerate and cared for her employees. Whenever I made mistakes, Jess would gently correct me and patiently explain things, which only deepened my admiration and respect for her. Initially, our relationship was purely professional. I helped Jess manage her schedule, organized meetings, and prepared documents. She was always attentive, every look and gesture focused. But gradually, I noticed Jess's gaze lingered on me a bit longer than usual. The brief touches as she handed me documents, the short but meaningful words of encouragement, these made me begin to think of her in a different way. One evening, we found ourselves working late together to complete an important project. The office was quiet, bathed in the warm glow of desk lamps illuminating our files and computers. As time passed, fatigue started to set in, yet neither of us wanted to leave with the project unfinished. By 2 a.m., I looked at the clock and realized we had been working non-stop. Jess sat across from me, her eyes focused on the screen but occasionally glancing over, her gaze softer than I'd ever seen. In the dim light, the sharp lines of her face appeared gentler, warmer. I sat there, observing her for a moment, and then suddenly, Jess turned to look at me, her deep, dark eyes filled with unspoken words. "Maybe we should take a break," Jess said softly, her voice low and calm. "It's well past midnight. Are you tired?" I nodded and then realized how close we were standing. We both stood up to stretch, and in that brief moment, my shoulder lightly brushed against Jess's arm. It was a small touch, but enough to make my heart race. I tried to pull away awkwardly, but Jess just gave a faint smile, as if understanding what was happening inside me. "Sometimes you need to take care of yourself too," Jess said softly, placing her hand lightly on my shoulder. The warmth and gentleness in her gesture were completely different from the image of the cold, distant CEO I'd known. I looked up at Jess, unable to find the words to respond, and sometimes silence spoke more than words ever could. Gradually, these brief touches and lingering gazes became more frequent. Neither of us could fully concentrate on work, both aware of the growing feelings that were starting to take hold. I knew I shouldn't let personal emotions interfere with work, but in that moment, I couldn't resist the deep feelings I had developed for Jess. In an unexpected moment, Jess stepped closer, placing her hand on my shoulder, her gaze tender yet filled with something unspoken. "Emily," she said, her voice warm and deep. "I don't want to pressure you, but these feelings, they're not easy to ignore." I didn't reply, just gave a gentle nod. In the quiet space of the late-night office, all barriers seemed to dissolve. Jess leaned down, her lips gently touching my forehead, then slowly moving to my cheek. Her kiss was soft and gentle, yet incredibly captivating. Between us, it felt as though there was no distance at all. Jess's hands were restless, playing with my bra. I pretended not to notice and stood still for Jess to tease me. One button after another was undone, and Jess began kissing my ear, then moved down to my delicate white neck. A very strange sensation spread to every cell in my body that I had never felt before. I felt like moaning, but out of shyness, I held back. Jess's hand started to move restlessly, sliding from my waist down to my curved buttocks, kneading a few times before moving down a bit to the junction between my legs. I gasped and collapsed. An indescribable feeling. I couldn't stand up. 2 hands wrapped around Jess's shoulders, my face brushed against her soft peaches. A tingling sensation overwhelmed me. I wanted to bite into them, caress them, but my whole body went limp. I hadn't made any move yet when Jess slipped a few fingers into that junction. Warm drops oozed out. It felt like I was stepping into a new threshold of ecstasy. My legs buckled and fell to the floor, pulling Jess down with me. Jess continued to pull my dress, my pink panties soaked through. Jess's hands had taken control of everything, the sound of her fingers sliding over me. The pleasure from Jess's hands made me unable to control myself and moan out loud. Jess's tongue greedily wrapped deep inside me. Her other hand delved deep into a cave that was warmer than a fireplace. I gasped in rhythm with Jess's hands. My body was almost no longer mine. I had been dominated from that moment. Jess's hand movements became faster until the second finger was in place. I felt pain. This was my first time doing this. I still had my hymen. But the feeling of pleasure overshadowed the pain from the friction, and Jess also sensed my discomfort. She gradually stopped, lifted my bra, and her fingers slowly caressed my 2 peaches. It felt as if Jess couldn't stop at that moment either. Her other hand rubbed the pearl between my legs gently. I arched my back like a kitten, writhing in ecstasy, unable to lie still as if something had taken control of me. I opened my eyes in a daze, my legs involuntarily spreading a little wider, moving in rhythm with Jess's hands. Jess smiled as her fingers rubbed more intensely against the sensitive spot, warm water flowing out and wetting a section of the floor. At this moment, Jess began to lean down, gently with her wet tongue. She licked each drop of water flowing from this junction. My thighs involuntarily twitched several times, until Jess placed her tongue right at the center, sliding up and down. I couldn't hold back a moan, unable to stop. I said breathlessly, "Jess, you're so naughty." Jess laughed and continued to make me moan from the depths of my throat as if my moans were pushing Jess to the peak. The actions became faster and stronger, and we continued like that until 4 a.m. Both of us were exhausted. Jess put on a dress for me, then we turned off the computer, and Jess took me to her apartment. We slept together until noon. When I woke up, Jess had prepared a meal for both of us. We ate in silence, occasionally glancing at each other and smiling shyly. That day, both Jess and I took the day off from work. She shared with me how special this feeling was. And then suddenly, Jess spoke up. "From now on, will you be my partner?" In that moment, I knew that these feelings were real and undeniable. I couldn't hold back any longer and decided to open up to Jess about everything I had been feeling. She listened, and the gentle look in her eyes made me feel like I didn't need to hide anything anymore. Jess gently placed her hand on my shoulder, her gaze full of understanding and empathy. "You don't have to be afraid," she whispered. "Everything will be all right." In that instant, I realized that Jess also had special feelings for me, but we both had kept them hidden, afraid of hurting each other. We didn't rush things, but gradually began to accept our feelings, treasuring each moment spent together. Though we kept everything discreet at work, Jess and I knew we had found something truly special. She was not just my boss, but also my companion, someone I could rely on. Our love wasn't flashy, but it was enough to make my heart feel warm and to give me more confidence every day.